Most people are weak, not because they lack talent, not because they lack opportunity. They're weak because they can't control themselves for longer than 5 minutes. They live in moods. They move when they feel inspired. They stop when it gets uncomfortable. And then they wonder why they're average. You want to know what separates consistent people from everyone else? It's not motivation. It's not luck. It's identity. It's control. It's the ability to operate on command, not emotion. You've been sold a lie that success is about hype, that it's about feeling ready, that you need the perfect mindset before you act. That's garbage. Consistent men don't wait to feel powerful. They decide they are powerful and then behave accordingly. Every day. Especially when it's boring. Especially when it hurts. Especially when nobody's watching. That's the difference. You're addicted to comfort. They're addicted to control. Now let's talk about something deeper. Speaking in tongues. Not in a religious sense. In a power sense. In a transformation sense. Weak men speak the language of excuses. They say, I'm tired. They say, I don't feel like it. They say, maybe tomorrow. That's their native tongue. That's the vocabulary of the average. Consistent men, they speak a different language entirely. Their words are commands. Do it. Finish it. No excuses. That's their dialect. That's their frequency. When you change your language, you change your identity. And when you change your identity, your behavior follows automatically. You don't need motivation to brush your teeth. Why? Because you identify as someone who does it. Consistent men treat the gym, the business, the grind, the discipline the same way. It's not optional. It's who they are. That's speaking in tongues. It's operating on a frequency that the lazy can't even comprehend. Most people are trapped in emotional English. Every sentence they speak is filtered through how they feel. I feel stressed. I feel overwhelmed. I feel unlucky. High-level men don't care how they feel. They care what needs to be done. Their internal dialogue is cold, direct, efficient, like a military command center. No drama, no whining, just execution. That's dominance, that's power. Consistency is violent in its simplicity. It's waking up and doing the same brutal work when it's raining, when you're tired, when you're bored. It's repetition so relentless that it rewires your brain. Most men can't handle repetition because repetition exposes who you really are. It strips away hype. It reveals whether you're disciplined or delusional. That's why they quit. Not because it's hard, because it's revealing. You think consistent people have some secret advantage? No, they just made a decision once and never renegotiated it with their emotions. You renegotiate every day. You wake up and debate with yourself. You argue, you compromise, you lower standards. That's weakness. The consistent man doesn't argue with himself. The standard is set. The work is done. End of discussion. Control is everything. If you can't control your body, your habits, your impulses, you will never control money, women, respect, or influence. The world doesn't reward potential. It rewards execution. And execution requires discipline. Discipline requires identity. Identity requires a new language. You must stop speaking like a victim and start speaking like a commander. Here's the truth. Most people are too fragile to accept. You're not inconsistent because life is hard. You're inconsistent because you don't see yourself as a disciplined man. You still see yourself as the guy who tries, the guy who starts, the guy who gets motivated. That identity guarantees failure. You need to kill it completely. Replace it with something colder, stronger, unshakable. Consistent people are boring, predictable, ruthless. They don't chase dopamine, they chase standards. They don't need applause, they need results. While everyone else is searching for a spark, they're building a fire brick by brick, day by day. That's why they win, not because they're special, because they refuse to break their own word. So here's your reality check. If you're inconsistent, it's not a time problem, it's not a resources problem, it's a character problem. And character can be rebuilt, but only if you're honest enough to admit you've been weak. Only if you're ruthless enough to change your internal language. Only if you're disciplined enough to act without emotion. You don't fail because you lack motivation. You fail because you don't know who you are. That's the truth nobody wants to say out loud. You wake up every day asking yourself how you feel instead of telling yourself who you are. And that single mistake is destroying your potential. Feelings fluctuate. Identity doesn't. If your actions are powered by emotion, you are unstable by default. And unstable men never build empires. Most people are addicted to emotional permission. They wait to feel confident before they act confident. They wait to feel disciplined before they act disciplined. They wait to feel ready before they move. That is backward. Powerful men move first. Emotion follows. Identity leads. If you identify as a disciplined man, you don't ask whether you're in the mood to work. You work because that's what a disciplined man does. There is no internal debate. There is no hesitation. There is only alignment between who you believe you are and what you execute daily. Look at your own behavior. When something is tied to your identity, you don't negotiate it. You don't wake up and debate whether you're going to brush your teeth. You don't question whether you're going to check your phone. You just do it. Why? Because those behaviors are embedded into who you think you are. Now compare that to your goals. The gym, the business, the skill you keep saying you'll master. You hesitate, you delay, you compromise. That's proof you don't see those actions as part of your identity. You still see them as optional, and optional things get skipped the moment discomfort appears. Identity is the root. Behavior is the branch. You keep trying to fix the branch while ignoring the root. You're chasing hacks, productivity systems, motivational videos, temporary sparks of inspiration. None of it lasts because you haven't decided who you are. The man who decides, I am disciplined, doesn't need constant reminders. He doesn't need to pause. He doesn't need accountability partners to babysit him. His behavior becomes automatic because it's consistent with his self-image. This is where most men get exposed. They say they want to be powerful, but they still identify as average. They say they want wealth, but they still see themselves as broke guys trying their best. They say they want respect, but they still tolerate weak habits. Your identity is always louder than your ambition. If your self-concept is small, your results will shrink to match it. You cannot outperform who you believe you are for long. Eventually, you will sabotage yourself to return to familiar ground. The shift is ruthless but simple. Stop trying to become disciplined. Decide that you are disciplined and eliminate behaviors that contradict that identity. When a lazy thought appears, it's no longer a debate. It's an intrusion. When distraction shows up, it's an enemy. You don't entertain it. You remove it. That's what happens when identity is clear. There is no confusion about what to do next. The standard is internal, permanent, non-negotiable. The world respects men who are congruent. Congruence means your words, actions, and identity align. Weak men talk about goals they don't live. Strong men live in alignment so consistently that their presence alone commands respect. They don't rely on motivation because they don't rely on feelings. They rely on who they are. That's stability. That's power. If you're inconsistent, it's not because you lack information. It's because you haven't chosen your identity with conviction. You're still experimenting with who you want to be instead of declaring it. And until you make that decision without hesitation, your behavior will keep swinging with your emotions. The moment you lock in your identity, everything changes. Actions become automatic. Discipline becomes normal. And the man you used to struggle to be becomes the man you are without effort. Every morning, you make a decision that defines your future, and most of you make it wrong before your feet even touch the floor. You open your eyes and immediately start negotiating. 5 more minutes. I'll start tomorrow. I'll go harder next week. That silent bargaining session is the reason your life looks the way it does. Weak standards create weak outcomes. It's that simple. High-level men don't negotiate with themselves. They don't ask for permission from their feelings. The standard was set long ago, and now it operates like law. When the alarm goes off, there is no internal meeting. When the work is scheduled, it gets done. The decision was already made. That's the difference between amateurs and professionals. Amateurs decide daily. Professionals decide once. Most people treat their goals like suggestions. I should work out. I should build that business. I should stop wasting time. That language alone exposes the problem. Should is soft. Should invites compromise. Non-negotiable standards don't use soft language. They are commands. I train. I execute. I build. There is no emotional clause attached. Here's the brutal truth. If you constantly renegotiate your standards, you don't actually have standards. You have preferences. And preferences disappear the moment discomfort shows up. Standards are different. Standards cost you something. They demand sacrifice. They force you to act even when you're tired, bored, distracted, or doubting yourself. That's why so few men maintain them. Discomfort is the filter. The second something becomes inconvenient, average men start adjusting the target. They lower expectations to protect their ego. They tell themselves they're being realistic. No, they're being weak. When you lower the standard to match your temporary emotion, you train your brain to disrespect your own word. And once your mind stops trusting you, everything collapses. Think about this carefully. If someone else constantly broke promises to you, would you respect them? Would you rely on them? Of course not. Yet you break promises to yourself every week and expect confidence to magically appear. Confidence doesn't come from positive thinking. It comes from evidence. It comes from proving to yourself that when you say something, it happens. Non-negotiable standards build that evidence daily. The powerful operate on internal law. They decide the kind of man they are and build rules around that identity. They don't skip workouts because they're not feeling it. They don't miss deadlines because they're stressed. Stress is not an argument. Fatigue is not an argument. Mood is not an argument. The rule stands regardless of circumstance. That's discipline at a professional level. You may think this sounds extreme. Good. It should. Excellence is extreme. Mediocrity is flexible. The average man wants room to breathe, room to adjust, room to escape. The elite man removes escape routes. He designs his environment and schedule in a way that forces compliance. He doesn't rely on willpower alone. He structures his life around his standards so there is minimal room for deviation. And here's the uncomfortable part. Once you raise your standards, your circle will feel it. Your friends will question you. Your habits will clash with their comfort. You will outgrow environments that once felt normal. That's the cost. Most people avoid non-negotiable standards because they don't want that friction. They want approval more than progress. When you stop negotiating, something shifts internally. Your mind becomes quieter. Decision fatigue disappears because the answer is already predetermined. You don't waste energy debating whether to act. You act. That saved energy compounds. Over months and years, that consistency separates you from everyone who keeps trying. If you want power, start with one area and make it absolute. A training schedule, a work block, a daily target. Remove the emotional clause, remove the optional tone, set it as law, and then enforce it like a man who understands that his future is watching every choice he makes. The moment you stop negotiating with yourself is the moment you begin operating at a level most people will never reach. Listen carefully. The voice in your head is either your greatest weapon or your silent executioner. And most of you are being destroyed by your own internal dialogue, not by your enemies, not by your circumstances, by the weak, emotional, undisciplined language you repeat to yourself every single day. You think self-talk doesn't matter? Then explain why two men in the same situation produce completely different outcomes. One says, "This is hard, I don't know if I can." The other says, "Handle it." Same pressure, same obstacles, different language, different identity. Different result. Your internal dialogue is programming. Every sentence you repeat is carving a deeper groove in your brain. When you say, "I'm bad at this," you reinforce incompetence. When you say, "I'm tired," you amplify exhaustion. When you say, "I'll try," you give yourself permission to fail. That's the vocabulary of the average man. Soft, hesitant, defensive. High-level operators speak differently. Their language is precise, short, direct. Figure it out. Stay focused. Execute. There is no drama attached, no emotional commentary. They don't narrate their suffering, they command their behavior. That shift alone changes everything. Most men speak to themselves like victims of circumstance. Why does this always happen to me? That sentence is poison. It places you below the problem. It frames you as powerless. Replace it with, "What's the move? Now you're above the situation. Now you're thinking strategically." Language determines position. Position determines power. Here's the uncomfortable reality. Your mind obeys authority. If your internal voice sounds uncertain, your actions will mirror that uncertainty. If your internal voice sounds decisive, your body follows. The brain doesn't care whether the command is positive or negative. It responds to repetition and conviction. Speak weakness often enough, and weakness becomes identity. Speak strength consistently, and strength becomes default. You need to eliminate passive language immediately. Maybe, hopefully, "I'll see." Those words dilute intent. They create exit routes. Command language removes escape. "I will." It gets done. No distractions. That tone forces alignment. It leaves no room for negotiation. Understand this at a deeper level. The world is competitive, ruthless. It does not reward hesitation. If your internal system is filled with doubt and excuses, you are handicapping yourself before the game even starts. Strong internal language builds mental structure. It creates clarity under pressure. When chaos hits, you don't panic. You issue commands. There's also discipline in silence. High-value men don't complain internally. They don't replay insults. They don't fantasize about revenge or self-pity. That mental noise wastes energy. Instead, they reduce everything to action steps. Adapt, improve, move. That's efficiency. That's control. And let's be honest, some of you enjoy the drama. You enjoy telling yourself a story about how hard your life is. It makes you feel significant, but it keeps you stagnant. The moment you remove the emotional storytelling and replace it with instruction, progress accelerates. You stop indulging in feelings and start producing results. If you want dominance, start with your vocabulary. Audit your thoughts. Catch the weak phrases, cut them out. Replace them with direct orders. Train your mind like a soldier, not a spectator. Over time, that internal command structure becomes automatic. You respond to difficulty with focus instead of fear. You respond to pressure with clarity instead of confusion. Your life is shaped by the sentences you repeat when nobody else is listening. Tighten them, sharpen them, make them authoritative. When your internal dialogue becomes disciplined, your external performance follows. And once your mind learns to obey your command, very little in this world will be able to stop you. You don't hate hard work, you hate repetition. That's the truth. The grind isn't what breaks most men. It's the boredom. It's doing the same disciplined action again and again without applause, without excitement, without instant results. That's where dreams die, not in failure. In monotony. Repetition is brutal because it exposes you. The first day in the gym feels powerful. The first week of waking up early feels impressive. The first push into a new business feels bold. But what about day 30, day 90, month 12, when it's no longer new, when nobody is clapping, when progress is slow and invisible? That's where character is revealed. Most men are addicted to intensity, not consistency. They want the dramatic transformation, the viral moment, the explosive breakthrough. They don't want the quiet, repetitive process that actually creates those outcomes. They want the highlight reel without the 1,000 unseen hours. That mindset guarantees mediocrity. Repetition builds neurological authority. Every time you execute the same disciplined behavior, you strengthen a pathway in your brain. Over time, it becomes automatic. Effort decreases. Resistance weakens. What once felt difficult becomes standard. That is power. But you have to endure the early phase where it feels forced and uncomfortable. Most quit before that transformation occurs. Look at any elite performer in any field, the boxer hitting the heavy bag, the entrepreneur refining sales calls, the musician practicing scales. It's the same motion repeated relentlessly, precision sharpened over time. There is no secret, there is no shortcut. It's refinement through repetition. The difference is that high-level individuals respect a process even when it's boring. Here's the part nobody tells you. Repetition rewires identity. The man who trains daily eventually stops seeing himself as someone trying to get fit. He becomes a trained man. The man who writes daily stops seeing himself as someone trying to start a business. He becomes a builder. That shift doesn't come from one big effort. It comes from small efforts stacked without interruption. You say you want confidence. Confidence is built through evidence. Evidence is built through repetition. Every completed task is proof. Every kept promise strengthens your internal belief. Over time, doubt loses ground because you have too much history of execution behind you. That history is created by doing the same thing, especially when you don't feel like it. Repetition also destroys fantasy. It removes illusion. In the beginning, you imagine success in dramatic terms. As you repeat the work daily, you see what it really takes. You see the grind behind the glamour. Weak men run from that realization. Strong men lean into it. They understand that mastery is supposed to feel repetitive. It's supposed to feel disciplined. That's what separates amateurs from professionals. The truth is simple. If you can't handle doing the same productive action every day for a year, you don't deserve extraordinary results. The world rewards those who can sustain effort, not those who can spike it. Anyone can go hard for a week. Very few can stay steady for years. Repetition builds mental calluses. The first few times you force yourself to act against emotion, it feels intense. Over time, it becomes normal. You don't need hype. You don't need external pressure. You operate like a machine with standards. That is when you become dangerous in a competitive world, not because you're explosive, but because you're unbreakable. The man who embraces repetition understands something most will never grasp. Greatness is not built in moments of inspiration. It's constructed in silent, repetitive discipline. Day after day, month after month. While everyone else is chasing excitement, he is stacking evidence. While others are restarting, he is continuing. That continuity compounds, and eventually the gap between him and the rest becomes impossible to ignore. You say you want freedom, but you can't even control your own impulses for 24 hours. That contradiction is the reason most men stay trapped. They talk about independence, wealth, authority, yet they are controlled by cravings, distractions, and moods. A man who cannot control himself is already owned, maybe not by a person, but by his weaknesses. Discipline is not restriction, it's leverage. It's the ability to direct your energy instead of leaking it. Every time you give in to distraction, you lose focus. Every time you choose comfort over effort, you weaken your standard. That erosion compounds slowly, quietly, until you wake up years later wondering why nothing changed. Control begins with small decisions: what you eat, when you wake up, how long you scroll, whether you finish what you start. These seem minor. They are not. They are indicators of authority. If you cannot command your body to move when it's tired, how will you command the team? If you cannot resist temporary pleasure, how will you build long-term wealth? Freedom at higher levels demands discipline at lower levels. Most people misunderstand discipline because they associate it with punishment. They think it means suffering for no reason. That's ignorance. Discipline is strategic discomfort. It is choosing short-term pain to create long-term advantage. It is saying no to impulses so you can say yes to bigger outcomes. It's the ultimate trade, momentary ease for lasting power. There's a psychological shift that occurs when you consistently control yourself. You start to trust your own decisions. That trust builds internal stability. You stop feeling chaotic. You stop being reactive. Instead of chasing whatever stimulus appears, you choose your direction. That is freedom. Not doing whatever you feel like, but being able to do what you decide, regardless of how you feel. Look around. Most men are overstimulated and under-disciplined. They consume more than they create. They scroll more than they build. They react more than they plan. Then they complain about lacking opportunity. The issue isn't opportunity, it's control. Opportunity appears to those who are stable, reliable, focused. And those qualities are born from discipline. When you discipline your habits, you sharpen your attention. When you sharpen your attention, you increase your output. When your output increases consistently, results follow. This is not theoretical, it is mechanical. Discipline produces structure. Structure produces efficiency. Efficiency produces progress. Progress produces options. Options are what people call freedom. Understand something deeper. Discipline eliminates internal chaos. Without it, your day is dictated by emotion and external noise. With it, your day is designed, planned, directed. You decide when to work, when to rest, when to train. You are not pulled around by every notification or impulse. That controlled environment allows you to focus on high-value actions. There is also power in delayed gratification, the ability to wait, to build quietly, to invest time and effort without immediate reward. That patience separates leaders from followers. The follower seeks quick validation. The leader seeks long-term dominance. Discipline trains you to value the future more than the present temptation. If you want financial independence, you need financial discipline. If you want physical dominance, you need dietary and training discipline. If you want mental strength, you need cognitive discipline. Every domain of power is guarded by the same gatekeeper, self-control. The irony is that discipline initially feels restricted, but once installed, it expands your life. You gain confidence because you can rely on yourself. You gain respect because others see consistency. You gain opportunities because you are dependable. That reliability compounds into influence. A man who controls himself cannot be easily manipulated. He cannot be baited by emotion or swayed by pressure. He evaluates, decides, acts. That steadiness is rare, and rarity creates value. In a world driven by impulse, the disciplined man stands out automatically, not because he shouts the loudest, but because he moves with intention and precision, while others drift. Everybody talks, very few execute. That's the gap. That's the silent separator between men who dominate and men who fantasize. You can measure weakness by volume, The more someone explains, announces, and dramatizes their plans, the less they usually accomplish. Real operators move differently. They don't need an audience to begin. They don't need validation to continue. There is a dangerous addiction to performance, posting about the grind instead of actually grinding, announcing goals instead of building them, broadcasting intentions instead of producing outcomes. It feels productive because it creates temporary attention, but attention is not achievement. Noise is not progress. Execution is quiet by nature. When you remove drama, you remove distraction. Complaining is drama. Over-explaining is drama. Emotional reactions are drama. Every ounce of that energy could be redirected toward output. High-level men understand this. They don't waste time narrating their struggles. They solve them. They don't rehearse excuses in their minds. They adjust strategy and move. Look closely at your own patterns. When something becomes difficult, do you immediately start talking about how hard it is? Do you seek sympathy? Do you justify delays? That habit is killing your momentum. The moment you start explaining why something isn't getting done, you've already stepped away from execution. Results don't care about your reasons. They respond only to action. There is strength in restraint. When you operate without drama, your mind stays clear. You don't inflate small problems into emotional crises. You treat obstacles as tasks. Something breaks, fix it. Something fails, improve it. Something slows you down, adapt. That direct approach conserves mental energy. It keeps you efficient. Execution requires emotional neutrality, not coldness. Control, you don't get too high when things go well. You don't collapse when things go wrong. You stay steady. You maintain pace. That steadiness compounds over time. While others are swinging between hype and disappointment, you are accumulating results. Most people burn out because they attach too much emotion to the process. They expect excitement every day. They expect visible progress every week. When reality doesn't match that fantasy, they lose intensity. Professionals expect boredom. They expect setbacks. They expect slow growth. Because they expect it, they're not shaken by it. They just continue. Silence is also strategic. When you move quietly, you reduce external pressure. You're not constantly defending your timeline. You're not responding to opinions. You're not seeking approval. You're building. And when the result appears, it speaks louder than any announcement ever could. There's also a psychological advantage to silent execution. You build internal confidence instead of external dependence. When your progress is private, your validation comes from completion, not applause. That builds real self-respect. You know what you're capable of because you've proven it to yourself repeatedly. Think about the most respected individuals in any field. They don't oversell. They don't exaggerate. They deliver consistently. Their reputation is built on outcomes, not words. That reputation becomes leverage. Opportunities follow reliability. Influence follows consistency. Respect follows results. If you want to separate yourself, stop advertising your effort. Stop announcing your grind. Stop explaining your setbacks. Replace all of it with execution. Build quietly. Improve steadily. Let others underestimate you. Let them talk. While they're busy making noise, you're stacking wins. When you operate without drama, your life becomes cleaner. Decisions are simpler. Actions are clearer. You waste less time. You produce more value. And over time, the contrast becomes undeniable. The loud fade away. The consistent rise. Not because they shouted the hardest, but because they executed when nobody was watching and kept executing long after others got tired of talking. What separates consistent people from everyone else is simple. They don't negotiate with themselves. They don't speak the language of comfort. They don't identify as average. They operate on command. They execute without drama. They dominate their own mind before they ever try to dominate the world. Decide who you are. Set the standard. Stop arguing with yourself. Speak like a commander. Move like a disciplined man. And if you're not willing to do that, accept your place in the crowd and stop pretending you want more. The line between average and elite is self-control. Cross it or stay weak.